Elena strode into the office like she owned the place, coffee in one hand, attitude in the other. "Hey, new intern," she called out without even glancing up. "Mind getting these files to the mailroom?" The man looked up from his desk, paused for a moment, and smiled. She didn't notice the tailored cut of his suit, or the quiet authority in the way he carried himself. To her, he was just another fresh face in the rotation of underpaid help she was used to bossing around. And he let her believe it. For days, she sent him on coffee runs, dumped admin work on his desk, and called him rookie like it was his first day in the real world. He never corrected her. He never bragged. He just watched, calm, silent, almost amused, until the morning she burst into the executive wing to complain about a delay in project approvals. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She just swung open the door and froze. There he was, sitting behind the desk with a skyline at his back, nameplate on the table, and a dozen senior executives waiting on his word. That intern she'd been ordering around? He was David Carter, the new CEO. And in that moment, her world shifted. What do you do when the man you underestimated is the one holding your future? Oh, no, 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 no. The stack of papers slipped from Elena's arms and fluttered across the glossy marble floor like startled birds. She dropped to her knees without a second thought, frantically scooping up pages, charts, and budget summaries. These weren't just any papers. They were the prep notes for the executive team's Monday morning meeting. And that meeting was in exactly 10 minutes. If even one sheet was missing, her boss would absolutely lose it. She reached for the last page, fingertips brushing the corner, only to have someone else's hand get there first. "Careful," a calm voice said. She looked up. A man was crouched beside her, holding the page between his fingers. Crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled casually above the elbows. Dark hair, a little tousled. His tie hung loose like he didn't take things too seriously, or had already had a long day. He offered her the page with a crooked smile. "You dropped a few lives here," he said, eyeing the data printed across it. She grabbed it, breathless. "Thank you. You just saved mine." "Happy to help," he replied with a mock bow. Elena stood up, clutching the stack tight against her chest. She scanned him quickly. White shirt, dark slacks, no ID badge, definitely someone she hadn't seen before. "Wait a second," she said, tilting her head. "Are you new? I don't think I've seen you around." He stood up, tucking his hands in his pockets. "Sort of." She narrowed her eyes with a teasing smile. "Let me guess, the intern from corporate? The one we were supposed to get last week." There was a beat of silence. Then he smiled again. "David." She nodded approvingly, brushing her skirt smooth. "Well, David, welcome to the bottom floor of corporate purgatory. I'm Elena, document mule, printer whisperer. My desk so far from a window, I forget what sunlight looks like." David chuckled. "Sounds like a noble role." "Noble's pushing it," she grinned. "But hey, it barely pays my rent." She stepped into the elevator and held the door for him. "Come on. You don't want to look lost on your first day. That's when the sharks start circling." David stepped in beside her as the doors closed. Elena hit the button for floor 12. "That's where the marketing tornado lives," she said. "Just smile, take your coffee orders seriously, and avoid eye contact with the execs unless you speak fluent cold stays and passive aggression." "Got it," David replied, a smirk tugging at his lips. She leaned back against the rail, her expression dry but amused. "They are smart up there. Smart, sharp, and allergic to mistakes. Also, don't mention you helped me, or that I dropped everything. I've already got the high-strung intern rep. I don't need more fuel." David raised a hand in a solemn vow. "Mum's the word." "And one more thing," she added in a mock whisper. "If Carol from finance offers you a protein bar, say no. Just trust me." His laugh came out easy and real. Elena glanced sideways at him. "You seem suspiciously calm for your first day. Most interns look like they're about to faint." "Maybe I'm just good at faking it," he said with a shrug. The elevator dinged. Elena clutched her folder like a lifeline. "Well, good luck, David. Maybe I'll see you at the granola station later." "Looking forward to it," he said, stepping aside as she hurried out. David stayed behind, watching the doors close slowly in front of him. He didn't correct her. He didn't say anything at all. He just smiled and let the misunderstanding take root. By Friday, it had become a quiet rhythm. Lunch in the cafeteria with the intern. Easy conversations over overcooked pasta. Shared smirks between elevator rides and glances that lingered a second longer than necessary. Elena didn't even remember how it started, only that it felt like the most natural part of her day. She was the one who made the first move. She felt like she owed him. After all, he'd saved her from potential disaster that Monday morning, sprinting after her with those critical folders. So when she spotted him later that day near the lockers, she raised 2 cafeteria trays like an offering. "You saved my job," she called. "Least I can do is repay you with tragic spaghetti and suspicious garlic bread." David blinked at the plastic tray. "Is this what workplace gratitude looks like now?" "In my world, yes," she said, placing the tray on the table. "Besides, the spaghetti's got personality. Like you." He chuckled and started eating without protest. And just like that, it became their thing. Lunches at the faded table near the vending machines. Watery coffee in paper cups. Elena filling him in on office politics. The turf war over the good stapler, the sacred stash of Carol's sketchy protein bars, the elusive copy on the second floor that only worked when no one was watching. David didn't talk much, but when he did, it was always dry, perfectly timed, and effortlessly funny. But what really stood out, he listened, really listened, and that was rare. What surprised her wasn't just the chemistry or the laughs. It was how easy it felt, like they'd known each other longer than a week. One rainy afternoon, while gray lines ran down the office windows, she stirred sugar into her tea and spoke softly. "My mom's on dialysis," she said, barely above a whisper. 3 times a week. David looked up, his fork paused in midair. "That's a lot." "It is," she said, then shrugged. "But you get used to it. She's tougher than I'll ever be. I just keep things moving." He didn't jump in with awkward pity or reflexive apologies. He just nodded, silent, respectful. "I work nights too," she added after a beat. "At this coffee shop near my apartment. Helps cover the bills. Rent doesn't wait." David let out a low whistle. "Do you even sleep?" "Enough to survive," she said with a tired grin. "Barely." Her eyes lingered on the window. "Someday, I want to open my own little print shop. Maybe near school or library. Put up a coffee machine. Hang some old photos on the walls. Nothing big. Just mine. Quiet. Simple." She hadn't even realized she was holding her breath until she glanced sideways at him. This was usually the moment where people laughed, told her she was dreaming too small or to be more practical. But David didn't. "That sounds like the kind of place I'd actually go," he said simply. She blinked, caught off guard. "Really?" "Yeah. It's not loud or flashy, but it sounds useful. Safe. And it's yours." A small smile crept across her lips, surprised by how much his words meant. She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly shy. "God, I don't know why I'm telling you all this." "Maybe because I'm a safe stranger," he offered, glancing down at his tray of questionable cafeteria food. "Terrible taste, but very trustworthy." "Maybe," she said softly. Later that week, she was hauling a crate of bottled water up the narrow back stairwell, arms straining, breath catching in her throat. Before she could mutter the curse that was building, a hand reached in and lifted half the weight from her arms. She nearly dropped the rest in shock. "You didn't have to." "You looked one swear away from throwing the whole thing." "I was mid-swear," she huffed, catching her breath. The next morning, when she opened her desk drawer, there was a note waiting for her. A simple yellow post-it, written in steady, neat handwriting. "One step at a time. You're doing great." Elena stared at it for a long moment, unmoving. Then, carefully, she peeled it off and tucked it into her wallet. All day, her fingers brushed it more than once without meaning to. She couldn't explain why, but something had begun to shift. Something small but real, like sunlight sneaking in through a window no one noticed was open. And still, David hadn't corrected her. Not once. Thursday started like any other. Elena had just wrestled the temperamental printer back into operation for the third time when her supervisor's voice cut through the hum of fluorescent lights. "Elena," Mark said, eyes still on his phone. "They need you upstairs. VIP boardroom setup, refreshments, pastries, the works. And for God's sake, don't spill anything." She froze. Upstairs. That meant the executive floor. She had never been up there. It might as well have been another planet. Marble floors, sleek glass offices, leather chairs, and people who spoke only in acronyms and rarely looked at anyone below their pay grade. She nodded quickly, wiped her sweaty palms against her skirt, and grabbed the catering cart. The elevator ride felt painfully slow. She caught her reflection in the mirrored panel, faint shadows under her eyes from the late shift at the coffee shop the night before. Her white blouse was a little wrinkled, and humidity had begun to frizz the edges of her bun. Still, she lifted her chin when the doors opened. The boardroom was massive, easily the largest room she'd ever stepped into in that building. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled sunlight across a long, gleaming mahogany table. Leather chairs lined each side like thrones. Everything smelled of Polish and importance. She moved quietly, laying out pastries and coffee cups with careful hands. A few execs had already arrived, speaking in hushed, clipped tones about quarterly projections. And then she heard footsteps. She looked up, and her heart nearly stopped. Standing at the head of the table was David, but not her David. Not the one from lunch breaks and printer jokes and sticky note encouragements. This David wore a perfectly tailored navy suit. His hair was smooth, his posture straight, and his face was all business, calm, controlled, unreadable. Then the regional director spoke. "Everyone, please welcome David Lauron, our new Vice President of Strategic Development. Just returned from overseeing our European operations." The room broke into polite applause. Elena stood frozen, fingers gripping the tray so hard her knuckles turned white. Vice President. The title echoed in her skull. Her thoughts scattered. Every word, every joke, every time she called him the new intern, every dry comment, every ridiculous cafeteria lunch, the time she taught him how to clear a paper jam. He had never corrected her. Not once. Her face flushed hot, spreading from her ears down her neck like fire. She lowered the final cup to the table and turned to leave, too quickly, faster than necessary. She was almost to the door when she heard it. "Elena." She froze. His voice was gentle, quiet, just loud enough to catch her over the murmurs in the room. "Can we talk after the meeting?" She didn't turn around, just gave the smallest nod and stepped out, eyes glued to the floor. She didn't cry in front of them, not in the elevator either. But when she reached the stairwell, the cold, echoing one used only by maintenance staff, she sat down on the metal step and let the tears fall, silent and sharp. An hour later, she was in the break room, pretending to be busy rearranging the napkin drawer when she heard his voice again. "Elena." She turned slowly. He still wore the suit, still looked every bit the man she now realized he was. But his face, it wasn't the one she'd seen in that boardroom. It was open, honest, regretful. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping in. "When you thought I was an intern, I should have told you the truth." She swallowed. "Then why didn't you?" He hesitated. The words were heavier now. "Raw. Because it was the first time someone didn't care who I was. You didn't want anything from me. You weren't trying to impress me or get close to a title. You were just you, and I didn't want that to stop." Her chest tightened. "So what was I then? Just a break from your real world? A curiosity?" "No," he said quickly, stepping forward, but not too close. "You were real. The only real thing I had all week." She shook her head, blinking fast. "I get it," he added softly. "You probably never want to see me again. But just so you know, I meant everything. Every lunch, every note, every word." She didn't speak. Couldn't. He stood there for another moment, waiting, vulnerable, still hoping. But she looked away, and walked past him without a word. Elena had always known her place in the building. Third floor, far from the boardrooms and leather chairs. But after that day, even the third floor felt too close. For days, she treated the top floor like it was radioactive. Elena stopped using the main elevator, took the back stairs, ducked into supply closets when she spotted someone in a suit. She rerouted her entire routine just to avoid him. David Lauron. Even hearing his name in her head made her chest tighten. She had poured her real self into those lunches, those coffee breaks, those quiet little walks, let down her walls, bit by bit. And all the while, he had been someone else entirely. Someone with power. Someone who could have said something, but didn't. Was it all a game to him? Her phone buzzed one morning while she was updating a shipment log. A message lit up her screen. David, I never laughed at you. I never meant to hurt you. I like you from the first moment you talked to me like I was just a person. She stared at it, thumb hovering, then locked the screen without replying. The next day, another message. David, it wasn't because you didn't know who I was. It was because you were still completely yourself. Even when you thought I was nobody. That one she deleted. But the worst part wasn't the text. It was how much she missed him. His ridiculous elevator jokes. The way he really listened when she talked about her mom. How he always let her finish her thoughts, even when the office buzzed around him like bees in a hive. He had seen her. Not her name badge. Not her job title. And somehow, that made it all hurt more. 3 days later, she returned to her desk after lunch and found a small paper bag on her chair. Curious, she opened it. The rich, earthy scent of coffee hit her immediately, her favorite dark roast. The one she'd offhandedly mentioned once near the vending machine, weeks ago. Inside the bag was a handwritten note on thick ivory cardstock. Thank you for making me feel seen. Her breath caught. She sat down slowly, fingers clutching the note. He remembered. All of it. The tiny things nobody ever noticed. Not the way she looked, or how many reports she filed, but the person she was beneath it all. She didn't reply. Not yet. But something inside her began to thaw. The raw anger shifted, didn't vanish, but settled into a quieter, dull ache. That afternoon, she brewed the coffee at her desk, and when the aroma filled her little corner of the office, something in her chest softened. She didn't smile, but she didn't throw away the note either. Around 4 p.m., the sky cracked open and poured rain across the tall glass windows of the building. Elena, carrying a stack of printer paper, paused at the break room window to watch the storm. Of course, she'd forgotten her umbrella again. She took the long hallway toward the back exit, hoping to make it to the bus stop before the downpour got worse. But when she turned the corner, she stopped in her tracks. Just beyond the rear lobby doors, David was standing beside Mr. Ramon, the night janitor, helping him fold up a massive, wind-wrecked umbrella. One side of the fabric had ripped and flapped wildly in the wind like a torn sail. David, now soaked from the waist down, was laughing softly as he wrangled the broken frame with the older man. It was the same laugh she remembered from the elevator. That quiet, unpolished laugh full of patience. No suit jacket today. Just rolled-up sleeves and slacks. For a moment, he looked like the intern she had first met. Elena didn't move. She just watched. Watched as David clapped Mr. Ramon on the back and waved him off toward the parking lot. Then he turned and saw her. Their eyes met through the rain-slick glass. He didn't smile. Not right away. Just looked at her the way he always had, like she was the only person in the world. She hesitated, then slowly pushed open the door and stepped under the narrow overhang. Rain thundered just inches away. She folded her hands into her cardigan sleeves, hugging herself as she stared out at the storm. David stayed quiet for a moment. "No umbrella?" he asked gently. She shook her head. Her lips twitched, still terrible at remembering the basics. He smiled, just a little. Some things don't change. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. Just waiting. "I'm not mad because you're the vice president," she said finally. David turned toward her, listening. "I'm mad because when I talked to you, I let my guard down. I let you in, and now I don't know what was real." His voice was soft. "Everything I said was real." She looked at him, rainlight danced in her eyes. "You let me believe you were someone else," she said. "You let me trust you. And I thought maybe," her voice broke, "I thought maybe I mattered. Not because you were intrigued, but because you saw me." David stepped closer, not too close, just enough that his voice dropped low between them. You did matter. You still do. Elena swallowed, unsure, but he continued, voice even gentler. You're the only person who ever talked to me without looking at my title first. You didn't flinch when I was awkward. You teased me. You told me your story without asking for anything in return. That meant more than I ever let on. She blinked fast, then looked away. I didn't want to be some kind of test. You weren't. When she met his gaze again, there was nothing between them. No office walls, no job titles, no layers of performance. Just two people standing under a rain-soaked awning, stripped down to truth. He stepped back half a pace, like he sensed she still needed air. The silence between them lingered, but this time it didn't feel heavy. Want to share a cab? He asked, voice almost casual. She hesitated, then nodded, just once. And beside her, David smiled. Not the executive smile, the real one, the one that started everything. They never called it dating, not out loud. There were no labels, no grand declarations. Just a quiet, unfolding truth of two people learning the shape of each other's world. After hours, when the office lights dimmed and the keyboard chatter faded into the sound of janitor carts and clicking doors, Elena and David would slip out into the city together. They had no destination, just footsteps that began to fall into rhythm, side by side. But somehow, in the days that followed, each evening carved out a shape of its own, something that felt different than anything either of them had ever known. They started meeting in places no ID badge could follow. A cramped second-hand bookstore where a chubby orange cat slept beside the cash register. A tiny Vietnamese spot with only 6 sidewalk tables and a hand-scribbled chalkboard menu. A food truck that parked by the pier and served just 2 dishes, but both were perfect. And a park bench above the river, where the street lamps painted stars across the water's surface. In those stolen hours, they spoke more than they ate, more than they touched. They listened. One night, seated across from each other at a rickety patio table strung with mismatched paper lanterns, Elena wrapped her fingers around a steaming bowl of pho and let out a slow breath, like she was finally letting something settle. I used to dream about owning a photo booth, she murmured. Her eyes didn't quite meet his. David tilted his head, genuinely curious, like the ones in the mall. Not exactly, she said with a faint, nostalgic smile. The portable kind. You know, with instant prints. Years ago, I volunteered at this community center. Some of the kids didn't have a single photo of themselves. Not one. She paused, her voice softer now. I remember this little girl, Alyssa, maybe 6 years old. She stared at the camera like it was some kind of magic, and when her picture printed out, she held it like it was treasure. David didn't speak. He just leaned in, the quiet hum of the city filling the spaces between her words. I always wanted to set one up outside schools, she went on. Charge $1, just enough to cover ink and paper. Give kids a memory, proof they mattered. She finally looked up, half expecting him to offer that polite little smile people gave when dreams sounded a bit too soft. But David's voice was steady. That's beautiful. She gave a small, self-conscious shrug. It's kind of silly. No, he said firmly. It's probably the most unsilly thing I've ever heard. There was a softness in his gaze that made her look away. He wasn't teasing. He meant it. Most people want yachts or crypto or IPOs, he added. You want to give a kid a photo that says, you exist. Elena laughed gently, surprised by the way her heart eased. Something impractical, she said. Something good, he corrected. Silence fell again, warm, unhurried. Then David stirred his tea and said, When I was 12, my dad sat me down and told me I'd be CEO someday. Laron men don't drift, he said. They don't follow. They lead. Elena looked at him, really looked. His voice had a different shape now, softer at the corners. Ever since then, he said, every room I walk into, I'm either underestimated or feared. Never seen. Not for who I really am. He smiled faintly. Then one day you looked at me and said, You spilled your coffee, Intern. She let out a breath of laughter. And for the first time in a long time, he said, I felt like just a guy, a clumsy guy with a caffeine problem. She reached across the table, fingers brushing the edge of his hand. It wasn't quite love, but it was something. A beginning. They kept meeting after hours, under umbrellas, in corners of the city where titles didn't matter. Sometimes it was just coffee and quiet laughter. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, just walked together, letting silence do the heavy lifting. One evening, he handed her a small box. Inside was a photo printer. Old, second-hand, missing the manual. But it worked. She spent that whole weekend printing. Pictures of herself, her mom asleep on the couch, David midlife with a chipped teacup in hand. "You look real," she told him, showing him the print. He smiled. "That's because I was." In those small things, a printer, a memory, a quiet truth, something took root. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. And slowly, they both began to believe. Not just in each other, but in something lasting. Something that didn't need a label to be true. But whispers are tricky things. They start like static, soft, scattered, easy to ignore. By the end of that week, the office was buzzing louder than the copy machines. Elena, the file clerk from the ground floor, with him. Maybe that's why he always got coffee from the canteen. She heard it in the hallways, hidden inside greetings that lingered too long, in side glances, in smiles that never touched the eyes. Then, on Monday morning, everything crashed. An anonymous email was sent to HR. Subject line, inappropriate conduct, executive favoritism. No name, no signature, just a mess of accusations and questions. Claims that Elena used personal connections to gain unfair access. That leadership had compromised ethics. She was summoned to a confidential meeting. Sitting across from the HR director, hands twisted in her lap, Elena felt like she was 15 again, explaining why she missed curfew. "We're not making assumptions," the director said gently. "But because this involves someone in leadership, we're required to investigate." Elena opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her mind flipped through every moment. The late walks, the shared meals, the photo printer. Even the way he looked at her, like she mattered. "I never asked him for anything," she whispered. "Not a promotion. Not money. Nothing." The director nodded, expression unreadable. "We understand. For now, just continue as usual. We'll be in touch." She left the room numb. That same afternoon, David stepped into the HR office. Calm, measured, but there was a gravity in his voice. "I'd like to make a statement for the record." The director looked up. "Mr. Laron, the inquiry is ongoing." "I know," he said. "I'm not interfering, but I need this documented." He paused. "Elena never asked for my attention, never sought favor. If anything, I was the one drawn to her because she saw me not as a title, but as a person." The room went quiet, and for once, David Laron wasn't leading a boardroom. He was just a man, telling the truth. David took a breath. "We understand your concerns, and I'm ready to disclose everything," he said calmly. "Every conversation, every meeting. And if needed, I'll remove myself from any decision tied to her department. But I won't stand by and let unfounded assumptions stain the name of someone who's done nothing but work with integrity." The room fell silent. A few days later, Elena was called back in. She braced herself, expecting a warning, a written reprimand, maybe even the end of her job. But instead, the director handed her a folder. "The PR team reviewed your writing samples," he said. "The ones you submitted last year." Elena blinked. "I thought those were rejected." "They were overlooked," he admitted. "But they are good, really good. There's an opening, temporary, for a junior PR coordinator. It's not a promotion, but it's a seat at the table, a chance for your voice to be heard." She sat still, unsure if she'd misheard him. "This isn't because of him, is it?" The director smiled faintly. "No, it's because of you." She nodded, stunned. A quiet smile crept across her face, one of disbelief, of hard-earned relief. Later, as she packed up a small drawer in the supply closet, she noticed a sticky note left behind. No name, no handwriting she recognized, just 5 words. "You kept your head up." She didn't need a signature. She already knew who left it. That afternoon, golden sunlight spilled through the windows of a small shop at the corner of Maple and 3rd. The scent of fresh paint and age would hung in the air as Elena stepped through the door. The space had changed, no longer a shuttered, forgotten photo shop. Now, soft light danced across polished floors, delicate tints of tea lined the walls, and behind the counter sat a brand-new Polaroid printer. David looked up from behind it. Sleeves rolled, dust smudged on his collar. He smiled. "You came," he said. "You said it was important," she replied, taking it all in. "This place, it's beautiful." "It's not finished," he said, "but it's starting." From beneath the counter, he pulled out an old, gleaming Polaroid camera. "I bought this place last month," he told her. "It used to be the only photo shop around. The old man who owned it said kids stopped printing memories. Everything lives on screens now." Elena ran her fingers across the polished buttons. "So why bring it back?" "Because I want this to be different," he said. "A place where kids can come after school, print a photo of a birthday, a best friend, a good grade, something real. And while they wait, maybe they sit for tea." "Photos and tea," she smiled, the corners of her mouth tugging upward. He nodded. "I remembered what you said about how some photos cost $1 but last a lifetime." Tears threatened her voice. "You did all this for them." David stepped forward. "For you. For what matters to you." There was a silence between them, gentle, full of light, the kind of quiet that feels like home. "You never needed me to build dreams for you," he said. "You just needed someone who believed in yours." Her eyes shimmered. "I never thought I'd be someone people built things for." "You are," he said softly. "You always were." Then, from his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small box. Elena froze. He didn't say anything right away, just looked at her the way he always had. Not through status, not through assumptions. Just her. "I let you call me the Intern," he said, slowly lowering to one knee. "Because for the first time in years, I wasn't seen as a title. Not a board member, not an A, just a man, holding your folder, hoping you'd smile." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, timeless. "I've had many names," he said. "Vice President, Director, Lauron. But the only title I want now is the one only you can give me." Elena's breath caught. Her heart pounded. She didn't speak. She couldn't, not at first. But then, through the blur of tears and laughter and disbelief, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." He stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and she wrapped her arms around him, laughter tangled with tears. Outside, the world moved on. But inside that sunlit shop, 2 people stood, not with titles or expectations, but with hearts wide open, finally home in one another.